Good morning. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm Mary Pregel. I am the Bureau Chief of the Research and Information Services Bureau. Here in Helena. Within our office is the Census and Economic Information Center. We handle all the census data dissemination, data analysis, as well as geographic boundaries updates, all those good things. So when you think of Census Liaison, that's our office that's kind of at the epicenter. Although I got to say that we do that in complete partnership with the Montana State Library. Many of the Montana State Library folks are here today, and I just want to give a special shout out for all the great work they do and all the help we have together as a team. So, first of all, thank you so much for coming. This is a really important project, and I think it's one of those really important projects that the government does that sometimes folks kind of aren't paying attention and has a big difference. Over the course of the census, this last decennial, they estimated $4 trillion was distributed based on census population numbers. That's a lot of money. I was doing the math. If you divide that by 320 million, that's about $1,270 or $1,270 per year per person. So that's a lot of money, and it matters how we count, and it matters to get the right data where we need to have it. And so we are particularly excited to have the folks here from the census today. James Whitehorne is the chief of the Redistricting and Voting Rights Data Office at the U.S. Census Bureau in D.C. I had to say he's a graduate of Penn State because Leslie Goldman is a graduate of Penn State as well. Laura Wagner is the Assistant Division Chief, Geographic Partners Data Collection and Products, Geographic Division. Wow. Assistant Division Chief, Geographic Partners Data Collection and Products, Geographic Division. U.S. Census Bureau. That's a lot. It gives like a really long card. I did. Graduate of Portland State. Shout out to Laura. And Kim Davis is also with us from the Denver office. Kim is our data dissemination specialist. If you haven't met Kim, you should. She does fantastic work for the census in Montana, running around from one end to the other, helping us figure out how to make communities know what to do with their data so they can make good plans and good decisions. Quick shout out to my staff, Maria Tromley, Dick Hansen, Tom Kaczynski, and Leslie Zollman are all here today. You know those people as well because they are all here to help you as well. And Michaela. Oh, there you are in the front row. I'm like, lost. Michaela won't be here in the front. So with that, let me introduce James and get started. Thanks.
Don't have to let her. I don't know if this is going to be any good or not. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate your attention to what we think is very important information. I'm going to start with a little bit of housekeeping, and I think we have a tight enough group here that we can do something that we don't usually do, but I think it might be helpful for us and also maybe for each other. A couple of little housekeeping things, though. There were some folders at the door, and in there you'll find several different documents. There's a couple federal register notices that announce the Redistricting Data Program and the Phase 1. But more importantly, there's a few things in there that specifically for redistricting that are pretty important. One is a copy of, if you can't hear me in the back, please let me know. Just raise your hand or something if I drop off. But one of them is a copy of the Public Law 94-171. And when I go into the redistricting portion of the presentation, I'm really going to talk about how this is a program that is set up to serve the needs of the state. It's a reaction to identify needs that the states had, and is now a legal obligation of the Census Bureau to serve the states for that program. So the language of that law there, it's a very short little one-pager, but you can see what the main focus around the law is. And then there's a big booklet called The View from the States, and after we finish the decennial census and the redistricting data program, we always evaluate what we've done. We look at the current landscape in the redistricting world, and we design the next census's redistricting data program, and that is what our marching orders and our framework is for the census. And in that blue booklet in there, for the states, you have what is our design plan for the 2020 census for this program. And I'll go through that in detail in my presentation. There's also strength in numbers, which will give you some metrics about the program and just some interesting facts. And then there's also several flyers, one of which is about our geographic programs. So you have short summaries of what the geographic programs are. And is there timelines in there as well? And there's some timelines in there as well, so you can have that as a reference leaving the meeting. You should also have a copy of the presentation in there, so if you want to take notes, to remind yourself of some points later, that's in there as well. And then finally, on your way in, there was a sign-up sheet. I tried to put it on one of the little desks there at the very back with some pens. If you could, before you leave today, just get your name down there. We like to have a record of who's in attendance and where you were from, so we can have that for our in-house reports when we get back to census, so we can continue to provide these information on meetings across the states. So with that said, something we haven't done before, we thought since it's a small enough group, we could probably get away with this. If people want to go through and just introduce themselves very quickly, going around the room and say where they're from, maybe we'll start back here in the back corner and kind of snake down through the room.
My name is Nate Rogers. I work with Missoula County, the planning office.
Maria Tromley, I work with Mary Craigla, Commerce, Census and Economic Affairs.
Dick Hansen, I work with the same office.
Tom is RDC office.
I'm David working up in the Community Development Division with the Denver.
Census Affairs, I'm with the Montana Association.
I'm Eric Appleman, also from Transportation Group.
Sheila Ludlow, Transportation Same Group.
Todd Hill, same group. Wallace, Northern Cheyenne Tribe, Rainier.
Katrina Cheney, Houston Park County Superintendent. Alan Peck, Legislative Fiscal Division. Jesse Fernandez with the Chronic Disease Prevention and Promotion Bureau at the Department of Public Health. Laura Williamson at the Department of Public Health.
Heather Zimmerman, same.
Stephanie Morrison, Legislative Fiscal Division.
Megan Burns, Montana State Library.
I'm Kim Davis again. I'm with the Census Bureau out of Denver and with the Determination Specialist.
I'm Joe Lanson of Helena, as former redistricting commissioner through several sessions. I live here in Helena, retired now.
Michaela Wolfinger, Department of Commerce, Civil Community Shop.
Michael Fashway, State Library.
Diane Papineau, State Library.
Jim Kemmer, State Library.
Evan Hammer, State Library. And I just want to reiterate what Mary said. We understand there are the liaisons, but we're very happy with the partnership we have with Congress. Thanks.
Best part is everybody in the room also whom I've partnered with in other areas, so shout out to all of you guys. Thank you. Something you know is great information.
So, and that's part of the focus of one of our mission statements within doing these meetings back at the Census Bureau, is to try to bring people together in the same room that have an interest in census so they can hear the same information together, and if there's things that they need to collaborate on or coordinate on, it sort of helps try to foster that atmosphere. So thank you all for going through that with us. With that said, this is still working. So I'm going to go over several things today. We have the 2020 Redistricting Data Program that I'm going to talk about. And please feel free, we like to have discussion. We want to get your feedback. So if you have questions as we're going through, if you want to ask during the presentation, that's fine. If you want to wait and you take breaks between each one of these agenda items, that works as well. Just let me know, and we'll take care of that. Or we'll address the questions as you have them. But so we're going to do the Redistricting Data Program first, and I'm going to talk about that, and then I'll talk about the 2020 census, highlighting specifically, especially for those of you who have been through a census before, how the experience is going to be different for the state. But this census is going to be a census unlike no other, and so we want to make sure that people are aware of the innovations that we're putting into place to make this census happen. Then Laura is going to talk about the geographic programs. This is a very important part. We're getting out here early with this information so that people can sort of plan for these things in advance, which we'll talk about several different programs and ways that we're maintaining our geographic frame. And then at the end, I'll just give you a few remarks about some of the community outreach activities. So as I mentioned when I was talking about what's in the packet, Public Law 94-171 was passed in 1975, and it was passed at the request of the states. They worked through the National Conference of State Legislatures because they had an identified need for data that they did not have from the Census Bureau at the time. With the court rulings of Westbury versus Sanders and Reynolds versus Sims, the principle of one person, one vote was established, and then also with the passage of the Voting Rights Act and certain civil rights enforcement activities, states identified that they needed some more granular data in order to be able to comply with sort of these principles and these rulings. So they lobbied Congress and passed Public Law 94-171 passed. And what that law says, in short, is that the Census Bureau needs to establish a program so that the states can identify the small area geography tabulations that they need to do their legislative redistricting. That's basically what the law tells us to do. So states have identified those traditionally as census blocks and voting districts. And when I say voting districts, that could be wards, precincts. We just use voting districts as a generic term to sort of encompass all of these small local geographies. So we put that into place. In 1980, we collected the voting districts. We created blocks for all incorporated places of 10,000 or more. We had 5 states that felt they needed full state coverage, so they contracted with the Census Bureau for full state coverage. And what this gave us was a large proportion of the population of the U.S. was covered, and 7% of the land area. But what we learned from that was that census operational blocks and what the states needed for redistricting were not necessarily the same. So we designed blocks at the Census Bureau to send enumerators out on the street, or send people out to do non-response follow-up, and we knock on doors and send them to the door. And to do that, we use street center lines or other features similar to that, where we can send an enumerator to a block and say, knock on every door on the right-hand side as you go around the block until you come back to where you started. So that way we can measure and accomplish full coverage. So that works great for our purposes, but for redistricting, what that does is it splits neighbors from the same street into opposite blocks. And so it makes, if you're trying to keep community interest together, or things like or those other types of considerations, it creates a problem. So what works better for the redistricting community is to use something like a rear alleyway, a rear lot line, or property line. And so we instituted something called the Block Boundary Suggestion Project. So we're trying to evaluate what we've done and better serve the states as we're instructed from the law. So the Block Boundary Suggestion Project was instituted for the 1990 census. We did a test in the late 80s, found that we thought it would be successful, and we implemented it. The 1990s had another distinction. It was the first census where we had nationwide block coverage. The Census Bureau had created the Tiger geographic database at this point. And so we could automate block creation, and we could create blocks for the entire nation. So we have, and we have ever since. So between these two, the states were given some tools that they could improve on that block coverage. So continuing with the theme of trying to adapt and provide states what they needed, in 2000 our focus shifted away from the geography for a decade, and it focused more on race and ethnicity and how it's categorized. The Office of Management and Budget, which is the government agency, executive agency that controls how the Census Bureau, or how the federal government as a whole, collects, tabulates, and distributes statistical data, reclassified the way race was counted and tabulated. So we worked through this process. We came up with a prototype product, and we put that out for people to react to. And what we found was it didn't meet the state's needs. The feedback we got from the states was these sort of 200 categories of race and ethnicity was just unwieldy. It was not something that we worked with. So we went back, we reworked it, and we ended up with what you see today, which is the 71 and 73 race and ethnicity categories that are on the current EL file, EL because of the public law. So that was the focus of 2000. In 2010, we went through a process where we enhanced the precision of Tiger. Tiger had been developed from several sources and was not designed to be a positionally accurate database. It was designed just to be relative accuracy between features. We realized with the growth of the GIS industry that we needed to become more in line with the rest of the geographic globe. So we worked very hard and got the census geography aligned to within 7.6 meter accuracy. And then we instituted the program, and we did it as a digital program, the redistricting data program. We put together some software through Caliper Corporation that we provided out to the states. The states could then use that software to modify the census files and provide their feedback to us. One of the things we did is we required the use of this software. That was not a very popular decision. It was needed on our part to be able to make sure that we can meet deadlines and that we could ingest the data properly. And then based on that feedback, and then that was unpopular, and recognizing that states have a huge investment in geographic information and the skill sets of their employees who are used to working with those software and those data sets, we didn't want to restrict them this time around. So we, again, have produced software called the GUT software. We love acronyms in the government. And so it's the Geographic Update Partnership software. And this is based on open source QGIS. And what we've done is we provide that out to states as an assistance tool. It's designed in a way that if the states want to push this out to the counties or to other geographies, they can, to get them to do work and sort of funnel it back up to the liaison for the program. But we're not requiring its use. The only thing we ask is that if you use your own software, that you're modifying the files we provide. And that's because we need to be able to interpret what you're providing us, and we also need to be able to ingest it properly back into the Tiger system so that we can incorporate the changes. So how has the program changed? I'm going to start with where we are right now. So right now we are in phase 1, the Block Boundary Suggestion Project. And this is the one that I talked about that was instituted in 1990. And we were already collecting the voting districts at that point. But this is the one that was instituted to try to provide tools for the states to manipulate basically the base layer, the blocks that come out from the census when we produce the census. This is important because census blocks are, if you think of it, they're sort of Legos of census geography. Every other piece of geography in census, the census universe, is made up of individual blocks. There is not a single census geography that we tabulate for that is not composed of individual blocks. Blocks always nested in that. So it's a very important piece of geography. So we have the Block Boundary Suggestion Project still going. And we are in the initial delineation phase. So we have from December till May of this year, we're collecting the information that people can provide through this program. And then next December, so December at the end of this year, going through May of next year, we have a verification portion where people can look at what we've done. And we have the traditional parts of the program. We have the must hold, do not hold. So that's sort of the tool that's used is that the person who's doing the digitizing goes in, they see a feature, they say, I want that to be a block boundary, you must hold it. Or they see a clover leaf of a highway that we're planning to hold as a block boundary, and they say, that doesn't make any sense, do not hold it. So they mark that as a do not hold. And that's the traditional core of what Block Boundary Suggestion Project is. We've tried to continue to adapt the program to meet the needs of the state. We've added the ability to do missing features, misaligned feature corrections. So if you see something that's in the wrong location, the example we had last decade that always springs to mind for me is there was an arroyo, a dry drainage ditch in New Mexico that was on the wrong side of the street. So if they put the precinct boundary on that arroyo, then the street was in the wrong precinct. But if they put the precinct boundary on the street, then the arroyo was in the wrong district. So they would have to falsify their district if this feature wasn't right. So we allow those kind of corrections to be made. This decade, we're also encouraging the updating of what we call area landmarks. These are state parks, prison areas, military bases, things that you may want to be able to isolate to a single legislative district or include in a single precinct when you're doing precincting. So we're collecting those boundaries as well through this program and updating them. And you go in, you create the boundaries, you create the area, and then you add must holds and they become blocks, and then you can use them in your redistricting. Now, one other reason we have this, and this is important this decade, is there are several states that do prisoner reallocation after the census data is released. And so we're having those states concentrate on prison areas so that they can make sure that the prison population and the civilian population are not included in the same block. So this is another way that they can do that, so that the prison reallocation will be able to separate those populations. Something that I think is the most innovative and is completely new for this decade is what we're calling block size review. So we worked with our geography division. My program is extremely closely aligned with geography division, and even more so this decade, to create the software that's going to create the 2020 blocks. We ran the software, we tested it with 8 states and got their feedback and adjusted it, and we think we have the software now that's going to create the blocks. And what we do is we create the blocks. We go through the entire process of creating the blocks, dissolving between undesired features, everything that's in our database, making sure that they're appropriate sizes, and then we put those out as prototype blocks as part of this program. So you can see what the blocks will be. If the geography didn't change from today, what we have in Tiger, you will see what those 2020 blocks will be. So we think that's a very valuable tool, especially when you need to sort of triage your time. You realize that when we're sending these programs out into the world, asking people to do this in conjunction with their day job. This is an additional burden coming from us. So we thought that this was a way that people could target their work, look at areas that were of concern. And the reason we call it block size review is we snuck inside of there an attribute that indicates this, the relative size of these blocks. We have A through F and Z. The Z is the block that would be estimated to have no population, no housing units, I should say. And then an A block is one that would have an extremely large number of housing units. And so this is a way you can target like these large blocks. The thinking being that there were areas where there's a lot of school sort of housing. There were sort of half dormitory, half apartment buildings that ended up in a single block in one state. And that block ended up being so large that it was the equivalent of 3 precincts. But since it was one block, they had to go through the laborious process of bringing in the lawyers and splitting the blocks and getting the long descriptions that needed to go through that process. And so what this does is allows them to find those blocks now in advance of the census, find features that are there or digitize features in that they can then split those blocks so that when that data comes out, it's all in useful form.
Leslie, how many A blocks do we, Z blocks do we have?
I don't know how many, a lot.
A lot of Z, but A's, do we have any A's?
No.
Do we have any B's?
I think we have 1 or 2 C's.
Yeah.
Not, if we didn't change any of ours, we wouldn't have to worry about that specifically.
And I would say that I think you have that listed on the website that you put together. Leslie put together an amazing website for the Block Boundary Suggestion Project. We actually are sharing with other states because it's a very good tool. It does the what, the why you're doing it. It highlights some things like, oh, this work was not done last decade, so you don't need to review it this decade. It has some tools where you can see the difference between the 2010 blocks and those prototype blocks. It was a great tool. So I think and that's publicly available?
Yeah, if you go to ceic.mt.gov, it's on the upper right. There's a link to it. It's a story map.
Story map, using that as a story map format. Repeat that, please.
If you go to ceic.mt.gov, and then on the upper right, there's a link to the 2020 redistricting that will take you there.
So, yes, it's a very good tool, and I think it's a great sort of illustrates how people can participate and why they participate. So I just thought I'd mention that. But so you have the block size review. It helps focus the work there as well. And this will also allow, when we go to verification, we'll recreate those blocks. So anything that you do now in the Block Boundary Suggestion Project will then be reflected in those new blocks you see. So you'll be able to see what the effects of the work you've done are in the next cycle.
So one of the important things about Montana is we're actually decreasing the number of blocks. We're going from 132,000 down to 84,000. So in that process, these blocks are getting bigger, which again, that's important for our populations so that we can know the data that is relevant to the questions that we have. So that's why we're particularly interested. We're always interested in the census, but we're particularly interested in how this project comes out because, like, as James said, I mean, the blocks are the basis for everything else that we're going to do going into 2020. So every decision we come out of this is going to drive everything else going forward.
And that's, I'm glad you mentioned that about the reduction of blocks. Because one of the goals when we designed the software that's creating blocks for 2020 was to bring the number of blocks down. We had a 30% increase in blocks last decade. There was one state that actually had 100%
increase of their number of blocks. So one of the things, and a lot of the blocks weren't really useful. They were extra blocks in water. They were closed loops of highways and things like that. So we've tried to, through the algorithm, and if you work with automated processing, you know you can try to do something that's the best on an overall picture, but there can be some outliers. But we've tried to do that through that software. So it's important to kind of look at the base geography that you're coming out from. Yeah, I wanted to echo Barry. When I first heard that we were losing that many blocks, you know, I thought, well, how can you do that and still keep the granularity we accustomed to? Leslie gave some great information that revealed that basically, you know, we started to look at it, we were losing 50,000 blocks that had nobody in them. And so that really cleaned up a lot of data for it. I can speak for redistricting purposes. And then the really nice thing was there was an increase of almost 3,000 blocks that had population. So in fact, we were improving the granularity in the places where people are. And you know, and then when I started to use some of the software to look at where it was going, it just made a lot of sense in terms of what our experiences in terms of how communities were growing and different neighborhoods were laid out. So my compliments once I spent time.
Yay!
All right. No, I appreciate that feedback. That's very nice to know because we haven't gotten a lot of feedback on the prototype blocks yet beyond what we did for that test. So that's very nice to know that you're seeing them. Because you know, one thing I always caution people in the district world, I'm sure you know this from your time, is sometimes you need some of that granularity even in no population blocks so you can make the connections between areas and kind of join areas for larger districts. So, but no, that's very, very good information. To know that it's doing better in the population areas is also good information to take back to our team. So I almost forgot one of the most important parts here, but this is something that the final bullet here is suggested updates to legal boundaries. So the redistricting data program has traditionally been the first program out the door for the census. And this decade, I can't say that. There's one other, and I'll get to that when I talk about 2020. But one of the things for the last 2 decades we've heard is that these folks are in, the redistricting folks are in looking at this down at the individual block level, and so they're seeing places where they think the place boundary is not where it should be in the census files. And so working very closely with Laura Wagner, who is over the boundary and annexation survey, we've aligned our programs, which is part of why you see that the time schedule is the same as what the boundary and annexation surveys is. And what we're doing is the redistricting liaison is allowed to give us now legal boundary changes to be incorporated into Tiger. Now, this does not take away the legal authority of the county clerk or the individual person who has the legal responsibility for those changes, but what it does is it gives us areas that we know then to reach out and contact that legal authority. And if they agree, the change can go right through. If not, then we can try to work between the two, start that conversation, figure out why is there a disagreement here, and try to get that cleared up here early before the census and before all these other geographic programs you're going to hear about today kick off. So you're working with a better and better base layer as you go through these cycles of different programs. So I think that's also a very important innovation just for 2020. So we'll repeat this cycle again with the same date time frame, but December of 2017 going into May of 2018, and then December 2018 going into May of 2019 for the voting district election. And this is where we collect the precincts and wards. We still allow for missing features and misaligned features to be updated at that time. We still allow for the updated area landmarks, and we still take the suggested legal boundary changes. We do require some more, like by the 2019 year, we'll probably add, like identify who the legal reporting authority is, and we'll ask the redistricting person to work directly through them as we get closer and closer to census and with our workloads increase with the Census Bureau. But we will try to facilitate that as best we can as well. So then we get to the data delivery. This is our phase 3. This is our current plan. The dates are pretty solid. You can count on those. We'll start releasing the geographic support products in November and conclude that by February of 2021. As part of Public Law 94-171, we have to have the tabulations to the states by 1 year from census day. So since census day is April 1st, 2020, we have to have them out by April 1st of 2021. So we will have the data to all the states by that time. The geographic support products that we'll send out in advance will be shapefiles. We'll have PDF maps of areas. We'll do state legislative district maps, we'll do voting district maps, and we'll do block maps. I found over time that the block maps are very important for small communities that need to redistrict and don't have GIS capabilities. Because what they can do is they can print a tabular list of block population data, and they can look at their block map of their place, and they can do a manual redistricting. It's a little more complicated. It's not as streamlined as usually, but the work can get done with the resources that are available.
And our office is available to help those communities as well.
We'll have block assignment files. That's sort of the relationship between block and place, block and county, block and the legislative district will produce those files. So if you need to know just which blocks are within one of those entities, it's an easy, simple way to get that information. And then the block-to-block relationship files. These are the crosswalk between the previous census's blocks and the new census's blocks. So when we build blocks, we sort of throw away the old ones and start from scratch for the next decade. So this is the crosswalk. So if you have, for some reason, a district that falls under some part of the Voting Rights Act, you can study it for retrogression to make sure retrogression is not connected. So if you have so retrogression is if you have like a minority majority district, it's a performing district. Retrogression would be if you were reducing the ability of that minority to select a candidate of choice. So this is I think this is mostly used under a Section 2 scenario. But so that we're going to have this out. This used to come out several months after the census or after the data came out. We've worked with our geography division, and they have since told me that we will be able to do this in the same time frame as the public law data comes out. So by April 1st of 2021, we'll have this crosswalk. And the data file. This is the current data file. There's some research going on that may affect this, but this is our current plan. This will come out starting in February and, of course, finished by March of 2021. We have the traditional table of the race and race for the population 18 and over, Hispanic or Latino and not Hispanic or Latino by race, and then the 18 and over version, an occupancy status table. And then this census, we're also putting a new table on, which is the group quarters table. So it'll just be the 7 major group quarters types. The group quarters, in case you're not familiar with them, these 7 types are the correctional facilities for adults, juvenile facilities, nursing facilities, other institutional facilities, college and university student housing, military quarters, and other non-institutional facilities. We produced a file like this in May after the PL data came out for 2010 to help those states who had to do prisoner reallocation or other population reallocations. But this time we're able to get this onto the PL file, so it will be out at the same time as your redistricting data, and we'll also have a racial component. We'll have the single race down to 2 or more races for those 7 group quarters. So if you're a state that reallocates prisoners, or there's states like Kansas that reallocate the military and the student population, Hawaii removes out-of-state military and students for the redistrict. This should help with those processes. And we have our collection unit plans. We're actually in the process right now of collecting the congressional and state legislative plans around the nation. We don't really have a good moniker for state legislative districts the way we do for congressional sessions, so we just base them on the year in which the election was going to be held. So we just certified the 115th Congress and the 2016 state legislative districts, so that another year here, so at the end of 2016, we will be able to produce data for those districts.
And again, that's why I think, everything comes back to blocks. So when you look at all these different precincts and legislative districts and school districts and all the cities and annexations, the more we can align all the block boundaries with all these other larger geographic areas, it just makes us the ability to have the data and make better decisions.
And so we collect this on a 2-year cycle. Every 2 years, this is something that we started. We only used to do the state legislative districts once a decade, but in 2006, when we collected them for 2010, we made a change to that, and we now collect them every 2 years so we can keep that up to date, so that data that's being produced from the American Community Survey is up to date, and we get refreshes on that every year. And just for those of you who are data users, I'd like to point out that there is a distinction between the plans that we collect. We actually collect 2 versions, or I should say sometimes collect 2 versions. Sometimes they're the same. The Census Bureau only tabulates data on those full blocks. So if you split blocks in your plan, which you need to for some reason for population utilization or some other purpose, we have to collect 2 versions. We collect the whole block plan, which is the one that we put into our database for tabulation purposes. And then we collect the official plan, which is the one which has the correct geographic boundaries. So when you get a shapefile from the Census Bureau, the boundary is in the correct location. It's splitting those blocks. But when you get a tabulation, it's basing it off the whole block. So when you split a block, they'll say, okay, well, you split this block between these 2 districts, but which one do you want to count? And that's how you create it. So I think it's just an important side note for people who are users of this data. And then we have phase 5. This is the booklet that's in the view from the states that's in your packets. This is where we look back. We work with the liaisons to find out what worked, what didn't work. We analyze the sort of legal landscape, what's changed. Are there any new court rulings, or sort of this prisoner thing is a new thing. So we've tried to make some changes to the program to incorporate and make that easier for the states. We're always trying to adapt the program and make sure we're meeting the needs of the states. So this is where we do that analysis, and we put together a plan that goes out to the liaisons. They sign off on it, then it goes all the way up to the director of the Census Bureau, and he signs off on it, and then we create that document that you have in your packets. And so this is sort of how I put this in here, because I like to use this as the answer of what you do every other 9 years. So that's the only reason I put it in. So the program never really stops. We're always working on something to try to make it go forward. It might slow down a little bit, but it never completely stops. And then I just wanted to add a couple things. So my office is the primary point of contact for the state liaisons for the program. Part of the law says that we have to conduct the program in a nonpartisan manner. Our main tool for doing that is we get the state legislature and governor's office to sign off on someone that they feel can represent the state in a nonpartisan manner. And so we work through that person, and Mary's our liaison in this case. And we work through them, and then they have the flexibility to construct the program within the state how they feel best, how they think the state best will serve. And we try to work with them to accommodate that. But we act as the primary liaison, and we will work to facilitate the boundary updates. If there's boundary updates that come in that we need to reconcile with the boundary annexation survey. And we'll continue doing outreach and educational things like this. This meeting is actually sort of our first major outreach and educational part. We want to make sure that we're getting census information out to them. We will do other things as the decade goes on. And then I just like to mention, since my office does have voting rights in its title, it's always had this work, but the office name has changed recently. It's just to reflect what we actually do. We also put out a citizen voting age population by race tabulation, which we do every year. It comes off the American Community Survey 5-year estimates. Those come out in December, and so we usually have this published in February. And this goes down to the block group level. We do nation, state, county, MCD, which would be township if you know sort of the New England and upper Midwest areas, and then tract and block group. So you can look at that. And
Do you have that on our website?
I'm not sure.
It is on the only place you can get that is on from Census, is from the Redistricting Data Office website, sort of buried in there, but you're welcome to link to it. It's on and there's files and support files.
Writing it down.
You go to, I'll work with you later to help you find it. So. But then the second thing, and I like to bring this up, this partly doesn't affect Montana, but we have the Section 2 and 3 language determinations. This is a voting rights tabulation that the Census Bureau is required to do. The director of the census, the law actually specifies that the director's responsible for this. And we do an analysis based on citizenship, voting age, some races, not all races are included. We do it for counties, townships, and American Indian reservations. And what it does is it determines places where language assistance is needed for polls in languages other than English. And the reason I throw this in here, and I'd like to bring this up, is we used to do this off the long form of the census, which is now sort of been relegated to the dustbin of history, because we now have the American Community Survey that's producing the same data on a regular basis. With the advent of the ACS, the American Community Survey, since it is current, Congress changed the law, and instead of every 10 years, they asked us to do it every 5 years, and that's this year. So I just like to put that out there. There's currently no one in Montana that's covered by this, but it's just there that in December of this year we'll be putting out new determinations. And then once we put them out, it goes in a federal registry notice, and then the Department of Justice takes over as far as we can. So before I go into the 2020 census portion of this, I just wanted to see if anyone had any questions about the redistricting part beyond what we've already mentioned. And get some questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, according to the schedule, I just want to make sure the dates right on this. All the proposed boundaries for the next census, like the revised precincts there, there's been changes there after as a result of things there. So the deadline for that is May of 2018, according to the phase 2 slide.
With a verification, it goes to May of 2019.
Yeah.
And actually, it's not official yet. I've kind of gotten verbal approval for this, but I have to put it through the project management, project change life cycle, and get people to sign off on it. For those people who participate in the voting district project and then participate in the voting district verification, there will be a brief window from December to March, December of 19 and March of 2020, where people can fine-tune those areas that are where there may have been additional changes, whether it be because place boundaries changed or someone increasing or something like that. We've got a lot of feedback from these meetings where people were saying, we can't capture our VTVs. Our VTVs change too frequently, or we know there's going to be a lot of annexations right in 19. So how are we going to get our VTVs up to date there? So we're going to, for people who have participated in the voting district project, we'll open up a brief window where they can do some fine-tuning of that as well.
No, I think that's actually good news, because in Montana we have 56 counties, 56 systems. And it's always far more difficult to get precinct lines than you would think it is. And if we have actually 2 years to gather that, I would think that we should be able to contact all those county people and get that information in the scope. So plenty of time. Thank you.
And the one thing I just added, the reason we're saying that we have to do this within our operational considerations that we had, and obviously in 2020, that's when everything's coming to a crescendo. And so we have to sort of put the caveat around it. You have to participate in the voting district delineation, the original. Get them as best as you can, verify them as best as you can, and then we can give you this extra window so that we're not getting inundated with people just waiting for the last minute. So we do have to make that as an operational consideration, just to kind of hold back the floodgates. But we do think we'll be able to do that. So now I'm going to go into the 2020 census part. And I've tried to streamline this part a little bit. So what I wanted to really focus on mostly is 2 things. One, I want you to know about how the design of the 2020 census is different than the 2010 and the 2000 and all those that came before, because it really is different. And the experience that people have on the ground who have previously been in positions where they were interacting with census quite a bit, because whether they were helping with some of the operations, or they were involved with some of the PR or something, it's going to be a different animal this time. And so I just want to make sure that you're aware of those things. So I'm going to try to highlight those and just kind of go through and tell you about some of the changes that are happening. So now, of course, you know that the purpose of the census is to conduct a census of population and housing and disseminate the results to the presidents of the states and the American public. The Constitution requires that we do it every 10 years, so we can do allocations for the U.S. House of Representatives. But it's also what's used for legislative redistricting, local redistricting, and many, many other purposes. The laws that govern the census are under Title 13 of the U.S. Code. Some of the things that are in there say that the census response is mandatory. Census data is confidential. Currently it says census day is April 1st. That's actually part of the code. We have to have those apportionment counts to the president by December 31st of census year, and then redistricting counts out by 1 year from census day, so April 1st of 2021. We have to send our topics to Congress. What are we going to ask? Those have to go 3 years before census, so we'll have those by next April. We'll have those to Congress. And then the following year, we have 2 years in advance, we have to have the actual questions, the wording of the questions. But this is, the law says that the census is conducted by the Secretary of Commerce and gives them broad leeway for the direction that the census takes in its methods. So some of the other uses are, that I'd like to mention, and Mary kind of alluded to there, or actually mentioned this as well, is that federal agencies distribute over $400 billion a year to the states based on these numbers. So that's a lot of money. And that is actually a conservative estimate. That's the estimate we came up with for 2010. We currently are looking at revising that estimate, and our subject matter experts in the area feel that number is going to go up. So it's a lot of money that gets distributed based on the responses that people give to us for the census and the accounts we come up with. So it's kind of exciting to be at the census nowadays because we really are going through a lot of reinvention, a lot of innovation. In October, we released an operational plan for the 2020 census. And it's, of course, it's a little dry to talk about that, but the reason it's important is because it gave us a high-level design for the census, and it gave it to us years in advance compared to what we did in 2010. The census is designed to have 34 operations, one of which is redistricting, or geographic program. But the challenges that we're facing, one of the main ones is that we're designing the census what we believe the environment will be like at the time of the census, while respecting a mandate to control costs. So the work we've done over the last few years, this is going to be a census of firsts. The first census to use the internet, the first census to move away from paper and pencil, and the first census to use technology throughout the process. And as I go through and talk about some of these things, you'll see that technology is woven into every different aspect that I discuss. So as we think about planning it, it's a very large and complex operation. We have to think about it in a number of ways. So remember, we're planning the 2020 census long before today, long before last year. It's more than 10 years. We actually start planning for the next census before the previous one concludes. So there's several considerations that we have to take in. And I'm not going to go through all these ones, so please don't get scared. I'm not going to each one of these ones. I'm just going to talk about a couple of them. Some of the ones that we find are most pronounced. One is declining response rates. Response rates, not just for Census Bureau surveys, the surveys in general have declined because people are overloaded with requests for information. People feel like every time they turn around, they're being asked for information or to fill something out of a survey. And so that is making it more difficult for us. We have the goal to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. And so we have to work to combat this sort of resistance because of the innovation of folks to motivate them to respond to the census. So we have a lot more complex living arrangements. Households are more diverse and dynamic. It makes it more of a challenge for us to associate an individual with one place. There could be blended families where children have two primary households. Some households have multiple relationships and generations living within them. So these are factors that we have to think about as we're trying to counter it. We also have a very mobile population. We used our American Community Survey in 2012, 2013, and 2013 and 2014 to do some studies on the mobility of Americans. And what we found is every year about 12% of Americans move. So you can see when you compound that over a decade, that's a lot of movement. So we're trying to keep track of that and make sure that we associate those people back to the correct address where they live on census day is a big challenge. And the last challenge we have is technology. As I said, we're infusing technology in every aspect of this census. So we're bringing innovation and new ideas and efficiency to increase the quality. But we're using technology from today and yesterday and last year to try to figure out what we're going to do in 2020. So we're aware of this, we're planning for it, but it's just a challenge that we have to do.
And you guys cut the budget $5 million last time.
You're stealing my big crescendo at the end. Yeah. No, we have.
You said a lot of things was your last thing.
No, I'll mention this at the end, but we are. It's cost avoidance. It's cost avoidance. We have a $5 million cost avoidance, so I'll mention that at the end.
That sounds like a government term.
Yes, it is. Yeah, but you'll see why. You'll see why. So. So with what we talked about just there, we recognized that we needed to innovate in several areas. And so what we did is we tried to attack the major cost drivers. We were tasked with, at the beginning of the census, to try to bring the cost of the census down to what it was for the 2010 census. That was one of our challenges, one of our directives from Congress. And we heard that challenge. But what we realized also is we're projecting there's going to be 330 million people in this country and over 140 million households. So getting everyone once and only once in the right place is going to be even more difficult. So what we did, we concentrated on those high-cost drivers, and we came up with reengineering address canvassing, optimizing self-response, using administrative records and third-party data, and then reengineering our field operations. And those last two kind of go hand in hand. They interact right now.
What are some examples of third-party data?
It can be several things. We purchase geographic data from people. That's third-party data. We get data from other agencies that we can incorporate. One of the things we're trying to work with states to get SNAP and WIC data.
Montana.
Yeah.
So Montana's already said no. They were initially contacted, and apparently the lawyers looked at the documents, not the census folks, and they said no. So the lieutenant governor and I have a meeting set up to try to change the no to maybe at least. So, but right now, the use of TANF, SNAP, and WIC data is they are not using them.
So we're working very hard to change those no's to yes. We do have yeses in some places, and we're finding that those data are actually very helpful in the work we're trying to do. And one of the main concerns is a lot of privacy concerns around those data sets. It's sort of off topic for me with this, but the Census Bureau takes that very seriously. And the Census Bureau's data is it's sort of a one-way door. We take it in, but we don't send it back out. You'll see our data calculations, but we do not share our records with other agencies. We're shielded in that way. We don't have to. I just think that's important to mention.
I just have to ask while we're on the topic, do you get IRS data?
Yes.
So
we don't highlight that because people don't.
But we can only use the addresses. Can't any of the other associated Title 36 data is stripped out, and we can't have access to anything but the individual address. So I want to be very clear about that because they're very strict in how we handle that data.
So you for example, wouldn't have the number of dependents at a particular address?
They cannot cross that data over because of their law.
Yeah, and like our use of IRS data, the folks who work on that not only have to comply with our, like we have to start protecting the respondent data that we receive from the Census Bureau. And it's 5 years or $500,000 or both as a penalty for violating that code. But then there's also Title 20, that's Title 13. And there's a Title 26 code, which is the IRS's privacy considerations. And the people who are in our building who work on Title 26 data have to also swear that oath and take their security classes and protocols and work in areas that are separated from the rest of us. So they're walled off within the building so that someone who's not Title 26 eligible cannot, or Title 26 trained cannot go into those areas.
And even if you do not have access to that space, you still have to take Title 26 training if you're going to have any interaction with a data creation with the product. So as an example, because I do products for everything, I have to take Title 26 training and sign it off.
Hey, Mark, and briefly, when you guys get data sets, can you talk a little bit, I know like with Wake and Tanner, the process that you do just to make it, my understanding is that you kind of create a unique identifier and then all the other personal information is.
So any data set that has PI in it, before we even put it into our flow, we have a person that strips everything out, and it's all deleted. And so that original file that comes in is never saved. So like when we have the parcel data, which we have parcel data sets that come in that have a lot of PI data in it, before we don't even do before we didn't even receive it. But what we do is we take it, the person who strips everything out, deletes the original submission, and then anywhere it possibly has, and then it gets put into our processing. So we don't, and everything is password protected. Every one of our servers, each person has to be approved. In fact, I have to personally approve anyone outside the division that has access to any of our servers. So it's very strict on how we process and move data through our system.
So, and I'll touch on the records a little bit later when we about how we're going to use them for some of the things that are possible. But here I was just going to mention this is about our address canvassing operation. Because address canvassing is sort of the first part of conducting a census. It's establishing your account. And so one of the things we wanted to do is to reduce the nationwide in-field address canvassing by using innovative methodologies to update and maintain the Census Bureau's address list and our spatial database all decade long. So it's important to note we are going to canvass the entire nation. I have to say that to make sure that I underscore that exclamation point. We are going to canvass the entire nation. It's how we're going to do it. So our efforts to re-engineer the address canvassing consists of three components, one of them being a quality component. And the first part is we're going to do 100% of our address canvassing in office. So for the 2020 census, we've begun, this is why I can't say redistricting is the first program out the door, is because address canvassing began back in September of 2015. But we've begun an in-office review of 100% of the nation's addresses, and we began this in September, and we're continually updating our address list and maps based on data from multiple sources, which include the U.S. Postal Service, tribal data, state and local government data, satellite imagery, and then a third-party data provider. So we purchased several data sets from some of the big names in navigation technology, and things like that, so we can work with that as far as getting additional information, additional resources to update our addresses. This work's going on at our National Processing Center in Jeffersonville, Indiana. And sort of a simple example of what we're doing is you could look at two vintages of imagery. You can see in one where housing doesn't exist, and you look at the other and see where it does. But then we follow that up with looking at the administrative records, the USPS mail delivery files. There's a lot of other things that we do then to verify if these addresses exist or don't exist anymore. So we recognize that although doing this 100% in-office canvassing, there's some things that we're not going to see using data or imagery that will require us to go back out to the field. So you could take, for example, an urban area with a large high-rise building. We may not know the number of units in there. We may know the number of addresses that are getting mail there, but we may not know that there's been sublets or things inside. Something that has come up several times in these meetings we've been going on with people have expressed concern about areas that they know of where there's sort of single-family home neighborhoods where the homes are being subdivided into multiple units, but they're still using a single address. So that's been expressed to us as well. So these are the kind of things that we're going to be looking for through our assessments And then what we'll do is we'll do a 25% in-field address canvassing. That's 25% of addresses in the canvassing. So this is a big reduction in what we did last time. Last time we had people walk 11 million blocks in 2010. So we're only going to do 25% of the addresses. So it won't necessarily be a direct correlation to the number of blocks, but 25% of the addresses. And then what we're going to do to make sure we're doing it well is we're going to do what we call a master address file coverage study. And we'll be sending people out to walk 20,000 blocks to compare the results from that in-person, in-field assessment to the work that we've done with our in-field canvassing and our in-office canvassing and our in-field canvassing. So we've started the in-office canvassing. The majority of the in-field canvassing will not occur until 2018. But we think that between these two and the tests that we've run, that we'll be able to do a quality job and still have an accurate frame of the census.
When you say it's going to be 25% in-field canvassing, is that the national average, and it varies around different states and regions depending on what their voting rights responsibilities might have?
Exactly. So these things are all interplay. With the 100% review in-house, and then doing these studies, the map coverage study, we should be able to identify where our process is not making the quality grade, and so we can use that to identify areas that are like that, to then go put them into our in-field work. Does that make sense? So they're kind of, it's the interplay of these different things to help us identify areas where we need more support. It's not based on, we're not doing 25% each state or anything like that. We're going to look at the nation as a whole and see what situations arise that we feel that in-field works.
So one of the situations in Montana is the problem with the U.S. Postal Service file is that so many folks in Montana live in rural areas and get their mail from a post office box, and that doesn't help us at all in terms of our address features.
That's why it's very important to get the partner files.
Yeah, and why RDL needs to get changed to a maybe.
And also participate in the local updated census strategy we'll talk about later.
So, dwelling units is a new feature of your data. I mean, it's not in there right now, is it?
I'm sorry.
Dwelling units of one address, say an apartment building, how many units within that building? That's not current.
No, we do have that information, but it's a matter of if something has changed that we can't see by imagery or something like that. We have to, and it's maybe not showing up in the SPS file. We need to be able to figure that out.
I think one of the things, preference is not the issue. I think it's when people converted their single-family house to like duplex type environment, where there's a lot of basement conversions, where they're making rental apartments. Those are hard to find, and the post office doesn't generally assign a new address. And so those are, trying to find those two housing units is really difficult, especially since the mail delivery is to a single address. They may not distinguish it as A, B, it just goes into one box.
So our second area is innovation area is optimizing self-response, just motivating people to respond. The more people we get to respond, the fewer housing unit doors that we have to knock on, the fewer doors we have to knock on, the less expensive the census will be, and actually the more accurate. We have a lot of evidence that shows that self-response provides the most accurate answers for us when we conduct the census. So at the highest level, optimizing self-response includes 4 components that are designed to maximize people's desire and self-response. So the first is our integrated partnership and communications campaign. The RFP for that is, I believe, out on the streets now, so that's getting underway, building that up. And the campaign is focused on getting people to respond on their own because it costs so much less. We don't have to send someone to the door. We can get people to provide their information from the internet, on a paper form. Any of those things is still better than having to send someone else to the door. The advertising will also make heavy use of digital media, tailoring messages to the audience, to specific audiences, and we've done that during the census presentation. The second component is tailored contact strategies. We're going to reach the American people using mailed invitation letters, encouraging people to respond using the preferred response method. What's very important about this is going to be a multi-mode census. People will have the opportunity to respond using the internet, using the mail, or using a telephone. This is a change from 2010, which did not offer an internet response, and the ability to use the telephone was very limited. So an example of our tailored contract strategies, for about 20% of addresses where there may be low internet connectivity or there's an older population who's less inclined to use the internet, we'll include a paper questionnaire in our first mailing. So some folks will get a postcard for their first mailing. For 20%, we estimate 20% of the population will get the questionnaire in the first place. Based on our test results, we realized that we can increase our self-response this way. The third component we have is through our telephone questionnaire assistance program. In the past, people would call it a questionnaire assistance program, and they would get assistance to fill out their paper form. So the person operator would help guide them through the paper form. We are now going to allow people to call the telephone response line and give their responses to the operator, who will enter it into the same internet system that they would be using if they had internet connectivity, so they can answer their census form. So this is another big change. And then the last element of it is something we call optimizing self-response, which is using the internet combined with our ability to do what we call real-time non-ID processing. So when we send a mailed invitation, it has an ID, and that ID is how we know how to link your information back to the address we have in the master address line. Non-ID processing allows people to answer if they don't have that ID. Say they lost the vote card, can't find it, remember they didn't reply to the census when they left the house, but they remembered they wanted to do it that day, so they're in the office and try to do it and they don't have it. Non-ID processing allows us to do that. And what it does is it allows you to go in, enter your address, and then it goes through a series of standardizers through screenings that can help us bridge what you're putting in to the census, and it actually ends where we allow you to do a pin drop map, where you can pin drop on your house location. So we can then use that information to tie your address to our master address file to make sure we're getting you in the right place. So this is important because we know that most people are going to use their IDs. Our testing has shown that if we send people IDs, most of them will use them. But why this is important is because we're going to have trusted voices out in the communities, working in hard to count populations. And we were talking about this earlier about areas that don't have internet connectivity. But what this allows for is people can go into a meeting and say, okay, the census is important, here's why it's important. Do you want to fill out your census form now? And they can pull out a tablet and someone can do it. Everyone can be sitting around the table filling out their census form. So this will really help get early self-response from these hard-to-reach communities early on, which we hope will, again, reduce some of the non-response follow-up rate. So we tested a lot of this. Census Bureau doesn't do anything without testing. Anything you see, the questions on the form, the shape, the length, the color, everything gets tested. So we tested a lot of this self-response stuff. And some of the things we found, or we did this in the Savannah media market, which has 400,000 housing units, and of those, 120,000 were selected to get our mail sample. And one of the things we found, this is the first time we were able to test advertising. Normally we can only get advertising actually at the time of census, but we were able to bring some funding in to be able to test advertising. We got 35,000 internet responses from people who weren't using that 30,000 mail samples. So these are people who saw a TV ad and saw a billboard, went to a community meeting, had a neighbor or friend. So we thought that was very encouraging. We were trying something called Notify Me. We thought maybe we could get people fired up and they could register in advance, and so then, you know, when they tell us how they want to be contacted by text or by phone or by email, and we send it to them and they'd be so motivated because they had registered in advance. Well, no, that didn't work. So that was the second time we tested it. It was also not well responded. So we pulled it. We're not going to do it. We recognize that sometimes we test these things are going to fail. We just cut them and move on and try to find another way. Finally, what else? Yes.
Have you ever considered any kind of incentives?
We get asked that. We are not authorized to provide incentives for people to respond. So, yeah. I mean, we look at it as it's a civic duty, right? A constitutional duty that we're focused on.
Yeah, when we sell the program, that's my job is to be the art shop, to be the promotional piece. Again, we go back to the fact that if you get counted, two things happen. Number one, you are now counted in your voting district, so you are really, otherwise you might as well just tear up your ballot because you weren't in the voting area that you are, so you are now officially making that vote count as far as your local areas as well as the U.S. representation. But more importantly, it's $1,270 that's coming back to the state because you counted, and if we don't count you, then that money doesn't come back. So it's tax dollars that you paid in that isn't reallocated that went to California or Florida or next door to North Dakota instead. So that's kind of the way that we go about the incentive idea to help people, but they are prohibited by law.
I mean, I always get the Nielsen survey ratings, and there's like something totally delightful about getting those 5 super crisp $1 bills.
Well, you're the legislative services. Just get those guys to give us an incentive.
I didn't get $5 when I was in Nielsen House. So one of the other things we did is we sent a single postcard late in the test 1 week before we stopped the advertising. And from that postcard, we got an additional 8% response. And so what this informed us from this test is 2 important things. One is that sending out materials by mail very important. The communication campaign can only go so far. The mailing will get it. The communication kind of gets us over the top. The mailing is really what motivates people to respond. But the other thing that we thought of was now that we have these other response options of internet and telephone, is we could use the postcard mailing to do a blanket mailing to areas we traditionally would mail to. Something like an update lead where we actually have going out putting forms on the door or reminding people to fill it out if they haven't done that. Or people who have PO boxes, like we mentioned, for everyone with PO boxes, we could send reminders to those PO boxes. So those were some important things that we learned from that. And just as a sort of factoid that goes along with this non-ID processing, in our test, we were able to match 98.5% of the non-ID addresses. So we were very excited about that. That was very nice. Yeah.
Are you still planning on doing the programs that they developed for the kids?
Yeah, I was going to mention that at the end. Like, there's some things like statistics in schools, which is still ongoing. It actually is still a program that's on running all that year long. I think they've just been working on updating some of the materials for it.
I'd be interested to hear how that motivates people to respond when their kids are
That's why we love statistics in schools.
Right.
So what we did last census is we sent out something to every kid that was kindergarten through 8th grade. So 420,000 pieces of literature. We also did a bookmark campaign. Both those were super successful and really did seem to motivate households. Montana led the nation last times in terms of early response.
And what about focusing on teenagers that are about to become adults and possibly were found?
Thank you for volunteering for your ideas.
Anytime.
Yeah, we try to work with communities to do that sort of outreach, so. So I'm going to talk about these last 2 areas kind of together and try to get I know there's a lot of information.
I have a quick question before we jump off of this. So are you guys doing a test? I think there's more tests going on, but the Savannah market is about as far away from the Montana market as I possibly can imagine. I mean, it's very media savvy. It's very internet well connected. We are the 49th in the nation for broadband connectivity. I'm super concerned about both the access by the internet as well as this, general Montana independence. I'm not filling out anything the government sends me. attitude. So what are you testing in areas that look more like this state?
We have several more tests scheduled. Let's see, we have our 2017 test, which is the one that we're doing for the Native Peoples areas, American Indian areas, Old Hill Reservation, Standing Rock Reservation. We are doing an address canvassing test in Duncombe County, North Carolina, and in St. Louis, Missouri. And then we'll have a 2018 end-to-end test, which is where all of the systems, all of the processes, all the way through to a prototype product for the Redistricting Data Program that will be sent out for comment to the liaisons and the legislative staff. With those site tests haven't been selected yet. One of the things I've been doing is, because I've been hearing a lot of concern, especially about the internet connectivity in rural areas, is making sure that I bring that back. And I work directly for the Associate Director for the Decennial. So when I meet with her, I explain to her what I'm hearing, and I give her these updates when I do the meeting agendas, or meeting minutes, for the meetings I've attended. So I know it's definitely on our radar. I don't know if it's something that's specifically Montana-like.
Well, at least it's working for me too.
Yeah.
But there's other things going on that are not just tests going on too. So the post office issue is being brought up because as one of my other positions is the USCS liaison for the Bureau. The post office has some concerns and a lot of different things of how we get physical address where they don't have mail delivery. So how do we connect that with the post office boxes? So we're trying to do some research on that that's separate, that's not part of it. So there are lots of other things going on to try and work through some of these rural issues.
You're not alone in that concern. Yeah, I've heard it echoed in many places. One state actually has a charter of names to go to the post office and pick up ballots so that they can get them to have the time of the election. Closing the post offices and the processing. There's a lot of issues. That's part of why we do the meetings. We want to hear that so we can bring that back on those concerns. Actually, I just looked at the clock. I'm going a little long on all this, so I'm going to try to speed through this part because most of what you really need to know about the re-engineering of our field operation is we're trying to reduce that overall cost of the non-response follow-up operation. So we're doing that in two ways. One, we're using the administrative records and third-party data to do that, and then we're using technology to sort of streamline what we used to do in our census office. So as a result of all of that, what we feel is we're going to have a much smaller footprint out in the community. So this is what I mean by your experience will be different if you've been around census before. So in 2010, we had 12 regional offices and 12 regional census centers. Each regional office had a regional census center. We've since cut our regional offices down to 6. This area is served by the Denver Regional Office, and we made the decision that there will only be 6 regional census centers to conduct the census. We'll have 250 area census offices as compared to 494 in 2010. We'll have 25 to 30 of those area census offices will be early ones that will be used for the address canvassing, the field address canvassing that we talked about a little earlier, compared to 151 in 2010. And we'll have about 300,000 trained enumerators for non-response follow-up as compared to 600,000 in 2010. So how are we going to do that? The slide doesn't give you a whole lot of information, but hopefully what I tell you. So we'll have the infrastructure and the technology in place, and we're going to try to use our most cost-effective strategy for contacting and counting people. What we're going to do is we're going to reduce the number of visits by using available data from administrative records and third-party data. We're going to use these to identify vacant housing units. We're going to use them to determine the best time of day to visit particular neighborhoods. We're going to count population or fill in responses with existing high-quality data from trusted sources. And this reduced number of visits will lead to a significant cost savings. And it can also allow us to focus our field resources to achieve consistent response rates across geographic areas and demographic groups where we do not have high-quality information and where population is truly hard to count. So we estimate that 63.5% of the population will self-respond. Once we've completed the self-response period, we're going to use administrative records and third-party data to help us identify vacant housing units. These are units based on information we have where we believe there is no one living. So if there's no one living there, there's no need to send someone to knock on the door. In 2010, we conducted 48 million non-response follow-up visits, and of those, 15 million were vacant housing units. So you can see it's a lot of houses to go knock on doors when you're going there. We had to send people out there multiple times to knock on those doors, even though we have data sources that could have confirmed that nobody's living there. So the first way we will use these data is where we believe we have to go with records to remove people from that universe and mark them as vacant. As a precaution, we'll also do an additional mailing just to ensure to those houses that we're pulling out as vacant, just to make sure that we're counting everyone. We're confident that these data that we send out is just an abundance of caution. We're confident in the data that we have. After we remove those, we're going to knock at each of the remaining housing units at least once. We believe that knocking once, we can collect another 22% of the population. And after that, we'll look to administrative records and third-party data to help us conduct our next visit. And for those records, or for those addresses where we have good administrative records and data, we'll remove them from the workload and we'll use the administrative data to enumerate that housing. And then at that point, we'll continue to knock on doors for the remaining houses multiple times.
So I don't want to make it really long, but I can ask one question. That is, in Montana, we have about 25,000 seasonal homes. Is there a way for you guys to identify those more easily in terms of your data sets?
So USPS designates a lot of the seasonal homes as vacant or seasonal in their files. And so one of the tests that are going on, the 2016 test, is to work through what they consider their mixing list and how to do that. So right now we're meeting with different USPS contacts to see how carriers flag those areas, so we don't have to follow up with them for a non-response follow-up.
Because we'd like to get that taken out of our denominator and look at the participation rate so that we can show that Montana's actually, we got dinged pretty badly in our participation rate, and a lot of it was because our state was a drop and leave state, so then when there was no ability for things to get mailed back from a cabin out in the woods, so we got dinged on our participation.
Right. I think we should add that into how it relates to the USPS vacant list and how we're trying to do that. So what you're saying is that as you respond for the national response rate that goes up on the web,
yeah,
that those should be removed from your work. So that would be great for the report because I think that impacts everybody.
It changed our response rate. If you backed out those houses, it went from 73% to 80% by backing out those houses.
So we are researching on how to do that, and it also, if there's other administrative files you guys have that have that information, that would be helpful as well to see how we can incorporate that into the reviews.
So Montana is a centrally assessed property state. We collect all of our property data at the state level, and you have name, address, etc. So that is another data set for this state that's kind of unique. There's only 3 states in the nation that centrally assess for the property.
Is it attributed in a way that identifies vacation homes?
I don't think it is, but we can look at some of the revenue data and see. But it's all cadastral data, it's all public information, so being able to look at that source relative to other sources, I think would be helpful. At least you could identify folks that were multiple owners of multiple houses, you could do that.
Versus rental properties versus primary.
And it's all like designated in the form.
So you do designate the primary resident versus the rental resident.
They do it revenue, they don't within the public file itself, but you could tell that people had multiple homes. That's all inside.
That's good information. And so I wanted to just make a note here about so when we talk about looking at administrative records and using this to enumerate people, we're talking about, we've been doing some research on this area, and we've been finding that you can use administrative records. Some of the administrative records we already have, the TANF and others as well. But where it usually works best is linked to single-person households, childless married couples, single child. Those the records seem to hold up to the testing that we've done. Once you go beyond that, it tends to sort of fall apart as far as using this for direct integration. So that's why we continue to follow up work. We can remove some using administrative. And so with all that being said about the census being a census unlike any other, it still boils down to really the same thing we've always done. We're just doing it with technology. We're doing it in a more thoughtful way. We're trying to use the resources that are available to us to minimize the burden and make the experience as positive as possible. But we're still establishing where to count people, motivating people to respond, doing the count, and then getting the numbers out for proportionate redistricting and then for the American public to use. And then we touched on this before. So, yes?
Are you using GPS technology in any of this?
So in 2010, when we did a full address canvassing where we sent everyone out on every street in America, we took a GPS point for every housing unit. And I believe we're still collecting GPS points.
So in our field materials, the new tool has a GPS point in it, but our preference is to get the local files address point, because many of them that we have, some of them took them on the street, and so we wanted to get one where it was closer to the front door. So a lot of our files through our GSS project, we've been replacing local housing unit locations for the stuff we collected for address canvassing. Because they're showing the local files and the work that the states and county officials are doing are more accurate. So we're using those. In addition, with any field work we're doing, they do have a GPS as part of the tool that they're using, their LUMA tool, which I don't remember the acronyms down for, but we love acronyms, and how we collect that data. But again, it's all dependent on the field person doing that and make sure they're standing in the right location.
And so we were joking a little earlier about the cost avoidance. But really what we were looking at and why we were tasked with controlling costs and why we're using a lot of these innovative techniques to try to drive our costs down is if we had conducted the census in 2020 using the same techniques that we would use in 2010, it would cost $17.8 billion. So by instituting all of these different changes and innovations, our estimate is that it will cost $12.5 billion, which is actually a reduction in, because of the growth in population, it's actually a reduction in the cost per household over the 2010 census, and it keeps us in line to an inflation-adjusted number that is equal to or less than the 2010 census. So we think that it's an important change for the census, bringing it into the 21st century, and we think it will be make for a very accurate and timely census. And with that, if we don't have any more questions, I think we're doing a great job of asking questions as we go along, which is my preference, because I like to be more of a discussion. But I will go ahead and turn it over to Laura. She will talk about our geographic.